Finneas Holt had been invisible his entire career, and he'd made peace with that. Maintenance technicians existed in the spaces between important things, fixing the systems that kept stations running, while diplomats and nobles walked past without noticing. Finn had learned early to appreciate this invisibility. It meant no one bothered him, no one asked complicated questions, and no one expected him to have opinions about things that didn't involve pipe calibration or electrical distribution. Tonight, that invisibility shattered. He'd been 12 levels deep in the ventilation system of Veridian Crown's diplomatic wing, replacing a faulty air recycler that kept triggering contamination alerts. The conduits in this section were cramped, barely enough room to maneuver his toolkit, but Finn had always been small. Good for crawling through spaces larger people couldn't reach. The voices came through the ventilation grate before he saw the people. 3 distinct speakers, their tones casual, their words anything but. The mining rights transfer will be approved next session. We've secured enough votes. And the colony. They'll need to be relocated before the survey teams arrive. They'll object, we'll cite safety concerns, standard procedure. Finn froze, his hand still on the recycler housing. He knew those voices, Council Member Vexeth, Senior Trade Representative Morin, and Finance Director Kellish. Important people having what sounded like a very private conversation. The payment clears once the contracts are signed. Half now, half on completion. Hellion Mining has been very generous. Finn's stomach dropped. Hellion Mining. He'd heard about their operations, colonies displaced, environmental regulations ignored, entire settlements erased for mineral extraction. This wasn't just corruption. This was condemning hundreds of people to forced relocation for corporate profit. He should leave. Carefully, quietly, finish his work somewhere else and pretend he'd never heard anything. But his hand slipped. The wrench clattered against the conduit wall, the sound echoing through the ventilation system like a gunshot. The voices stopped. Did you hear something? Finn didn't breathe, didn't move. Maybe they'd dismiss it as settling metal or check the vents. Finn scrambled backward through the conduit, his toolkit banging against his legs, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it over his own movement. He made it maybe 20 meters before the maintenance hatch ahead of him opened, and security guards blocked his escape. Out, now. 3 hours later, Finn stood in the council chamber, his wrists bound with energy cuffs that hummed against his skin, facing the very people whose conversation he'd accidentally overheard. The chamber was massive, vaulted ceilings decorated with historical murals, tiered seating for the 100-member council, and a central floor where accused parties stood for judgment. Finn had never imagined he'd see it from this angle. Espionage, Council Member Vexeth said, his elongated ears flat against his head in what Finn's cultural training identified as aggressive displeasure. Unauthorized access to restricted areas, attempted theft of state secrets. I was replacing an air recycler, Finn protested, his voice sounding pathetically small in the vast chamber. Work Order 7743, it's in the maintenance logs. I wasn't. You were in ventilation conduits adjacent to a private diplomatic meeting, Morin interrupted, listening to confidential discussions. I heard you by accident. I didn't know anyone was. Irrelevant, Kellish said flatly. The information you obtained is classified. Your presence constitutes a security breach. The council erupted into debate. Finn stood in the center, forgotten, while important people argued about him like he was a malfunctioning piece of equipment rather than a person. Deportation to Earth. Let the humans deal with their own spy. Too risky. He could share what he heard. Imprisonment then, 20 years in deep facility detention. For stumbling onto a conversation, that seems. We can't afford loose ends, not with the Hellion contracts at stake. Finn's hands were shaking inside the cuffs. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He'd done his job, literally just his job, and now they were discussing his imprisonment, his deportation, his entire life being destroyed because he'd been in the wrong conduit at the wrong time. "Please," he said louder now. "I won't tell anyone. I'll transfer to another station. I'll—" No one was listening. The debate continued above him, around him, through him. To them, he realized with growing horror, he wasn't even there. Just a problem to be solved, a variable in their equation of self-preservation. What about permanent silence? Someone said from the upper tiers. The speaker, a junior council member whose name Finn didn't know, said it casually, like suggesting a lunch option. Several heads nodded in agreement. Finn felt his blood go cold. "You can't, that's murder." "It's risk management," Vexeth said, and his tone suggested he was genuinely weighing the option. "A maintenance worker disappears. Accidents happen in space stations. Who would question it?" "I would," Finn said desperately. "My family would, Earth authorities would accept our official report," Morin finished. "One human maintenance worker, tragic accident during routine repairs. These things happen." They were going to kill him, right here in this chamber, while debating the most convenient method. Finn had heard stories about political expediency, about people who knew too much, but he'd never imagined it would happen to him. He was nobody. He fixed air recyclers and calibrated gravity plates and minded his own business. But he'd seen something he shouldn't have, and that made him dangerous. The council called a 15-minute recess to consider options. Finn stood in the center of the chamber, his cuffs still humming, guards at every exit. He thought about his sister, Elena, back on Earth, about the message he was supposed to send her this week, about how she'd never know what really happened when he stopped responding. He thought about dying in this beautiful room, surrounded by important people who'd already decided he didn't matter. The attack came during the recess, in the chaos of council members standing and stretching, conversations erupting about unrelated topics. Finn didn't even see her approach. Council member Vexeth's personal aide, a young Calirian woman with silver jewelry in her elongated ears, and the kind of graceful movement that suggested martial training. She grabbed him under the pretense of moving him to a holding area. The guards, distracted by their own conversation, didn't question it. She walked him toward one of the marble pillars that supported the vaulted ceiling, her grip on his arm friendly but unbreakable. "Nothing personal," she whispered. "You seem nice, but you're a loose end." Then she slammed his head into the pillar. Finn's vision exploded white. Pain radiated through his skull with the intensity of a supernova. He felt his knees buckle, felt himself falling, felt the marble floor rush up to meet him with cold, unforgiving reality. The impact knocked the remaining consciousness from his head. When awareness flickered back, seconds or minutes later, he couldn't tell. He was lying on his side, blood pooling beneath his head, warm and sticky and far too much of it. Above him, the debate had resumed. Jurisdiction question. If he dies on Calirian soil, technically orbital territory, treaty applies differently. Does it matter? He's human. Earth won't push back over a maintenance worker. Finn tried to speak, to protest, to scream that he was right here. He was dying, please help. What came out was a weak groan that no one acknowledged. His skull felt cracked. His thoughts were fragmenting, scattering like dropped marbles. The pain was becoming distant now, his body's emergency systems recognizing catastrophic damage and starting the shutdown sequence. "We claim he fell. Simple accident. Medical examiner rules accordingly." The aide. Bonus and transfer. Standard protocol. They were discussing his death like it was a budget allocation. Finn could feel himself fading, his vision tunneling, his hearing becoming hollow. He thought about Elena, about never sending that message, about how she'd eventually stop waiting for him to respond. He thought about dying alone on a cold floor while important people stepped around his blood to argue about politics. The chamber doors opened. Through his fading consciousness, Finn heard new footsteps, lighter, more deliberate. The arguing continued, voices overlapping in that familiar sound of powerful people who expected to be heard. Then a voice cut through the noise, not shouting but carrying weight that silenced everything else. Enough. The word fell like a hammer. The arguing stopped mid-syllable. Finn, barely conscious, recognized the sudden quality of the silence, not voluntary but commanded, enforced by something deeper than volume. "Your Majesty, we were just." I said enough. The voice was closer now, female, young but absolutely certain. "When the Crown speaks the word of silence, even breathing requires my permission. Have you forgotten?" No one answered. Because Finn realized through his haze no one was allowed to. Footsteps approached him, slow, deliberate, the kind of walk that knew everyone was watching. Through his blurred vision, Finn saw her, tall, elegant ears swept back, wearing formal robes that whispered against the marble. Queen Talvesh, the young monarch who'd inherited the throne 2 years ago. She knelt beside him. The sharp intake of breath from the council told Finn this meant something, though his fragmenting thoughts couldn't quite grasp what. Her hand, warm, steady, real, touched his neck, checking for a pulse. Her other hand hovered over the blood pooling beneath his head. "This man is dying," Talvesh said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Not loud, just absolute. "While you debated jurisdiction and convenience, a human being bled out on your floor." She looked up, and Finn wished he could see the council members' faces. "Explain to me," the Queen continued, "why I should not have every person in this room charged with murder." The silence was different now, not commanded but born of fear. "Your Majesty, he's a spy. He's a maintenance technician who overheard a conversation. I've reviewed the work orders. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was assigned to do." Talvesh's hand remained on Finn's neck, keeping track of his weakening pulse. "And you were about to kill him for the crime of competence. The information he obtained is evidence of your corruption, not his espionage." Talvesh stood, and Finn heard fabric rustle as she turned to face the council. "You accepted bribes from Hellion Mining. You planned to displace an entire colony without proper cause. You conspired to manipulate voting procedures. And when this man accidentally witnessed your crimes, you decided murder was more convenient than accountability. We were protecting yourselves, you were protecting yourselves." Talvesh's voice dropped to something colder than the marble floor. "While a human being died at your feet, tell me, did any of you even look down? Did any of you check if he was breathing? Or were you too busy calculating political expedients?" No one answered. "Security Chief Raven," Talvesh called, "take council members Vexeth, Morin, and Kellish into custody. Charges include corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and gross negligence resulting in attempted manslaughter. Also detain the aide who assaulted this man. I want full statements from all parties." "Your Majesty, you can't." "I can. I am. And if anyone else in this chamber believes a human life is worth less than your political comfort, I suggest you resign now before I start investigating your conduct as well." Finn's vision was going dark. The last thing he heard before consciousness left him completely was Talvesh's voice, still steady, still absolute. "Get medical here now. If this waking up hurt more than dying had." Finn's head felt like someone had taken it apart and reassembled it wrong, every thought accompanied by dull, throbbing agony. Slowly, carefully, he opened his eyes to find himself in a private medical suite that was far too nice for someone of his pay grade. A Calirian doctor stood beside his bed, checking holographic displays that showed various organ functions and brain activity. The doctor noticed him stirring and smiled gently. "Welcome back, Finneas Holt. You've been unconscious for 3 days. 3, Finn's voice came out as a croak. "What happened?" "You sustained a severe skull fracture, subdural hematoma, and significant brain swelling. We had to use emergency regenerative protocols to prevent permanent damage. You're very lucky." Lucky wasn't the word Finn would have chosen. "Why am I in? This is the Royal Medical Facility." "Yes. Queen Talvesh declared you under royal protection. You've been here since she had you extracted from the council chamber." The doctor adjusted something in Finn's IV. "She's been checking on your progress daily." I believe she plans to visit once you're conscious. Finn tried to process this. The Queen had him under protection, was checking on him. The council members arrested, all three plus the aide who attacked you. The investigation is ongoing, but I understand the evidence is quite damning. The doctor paused. You're a very lucky man, Finneas. If Her Majesty hadn't intervened when she did, you would have died on that floor. Lucky, there was that word again. 2 days later, when Finn was strong enough to sit up without his head feeling like it would split open, Queen Talvesh came to visit. She dismissed the medical staff with a gesture and sat in the chair beside his bed, with the kind of informal ease that seemed at odds with her formal robes. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I got hit by a shuttle, which I'm told is close to accurate." Finn studied her face, trying to reconcile this person with the voice that had commanded absolute silence in the council chamber. "Why did you save me?" "Because you were dying, and they were letting it happen." Talvesh said it like it was obvious. "Did you know they debated for 4 minutes whether to call medical? 4 minutes while you bled out, and they argued about jurisdiction." Finn had only fragments of memory from those moments, but what he had was enough. "They were going to claim I fell." "Yes. Accidental death during routine maintenance. Very convenient." Talvesh's expression hardened. "I've been receiving reports about council corruption for months, but I lacked concrete evidence. Your accidental witnessing gave me what I needed. But more than that, seeing them dismiss your life as collateral damage showed me exactly how far the rot had spread." "I'm just a maintenance worker," Finn said. "Why risk political capital for someone like me?" Talvesh leaned forward. "Because the measure of a civilization is not how it treats the powerful, but how it treats those who have no voice. You stumbled onto corruption, and they decided you were disposable. If I'd allowed that, if I'd let them murder you for the crime of being competent at your job, what would that say about my rule, about my values?" "That you're practical," Finn offered weakly. "That I'm a coward who cares more about stability than justice." Talvesh stood and walked to the window overlooking the station's central plaza. 3 council members arrested, 7 more under investigation. Corporate contracts frozen pending review. You've triggered a political earthquake, Finneas Holt. "I didn't mean to." "I know, that's what makes it so damning. You were just doing your job and you nearly died for it." She turned back to face him. "I'm offering you a new position, advisor to the Crown on worker conditions and systemic oversight. You'd have direct access to me, authority to investigate complaints, and legal protection from retaliation." Finn stared. "I'm a maintenance technician." "You're someone who saw what others chose not to see. Someone who nearly died because you stumbled onto truth. That makes you exactly the kind of person who should be in positions of influence." "I don't know anything about politics or—" "Good. The last thing I need is another politician. I need someone who understands what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be considered disposable by those in power." Talvesh's expression softened slightly. "You don't have to decide now. Recover first, but think about it." Over the following weeks, as Finn healed, the station transformed. Whistleblower protections were enacted. Maintenance workers gained direct reporting lines to oversight committees. The council underwent massive restructuring, with several members resigning under pressure. And Finn, still processing everything, eventually accepted Talvesh's offer. His first day as advisor, he walked into the council chamber, the same chamber where he'd nearly died, and stood where his blood had been. The stain was long gone, the marble cleaned and polished, but Finn knew exactly where it had been. Heads turned when he entered. People listened when he spoke, not because he was eloquent or politically savvy, but because the Queen had made it devastatingly clear. Every life had worth, even the ones powerful people found inconvenient. Finn thought about that moment, lying on cold marble, blood pooling beneath his head, listening to important people debate whether he mattered. He thought about the voice that had cut through the chaos, the hand that had checked his pulse, the authority that had refused to let him become collateral damage. In a galaxy of complex politics and competing interests, sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to let someone die unnoticed on your floor. And sometimes it took one person, one queen who chose to see him as human rather than expendable.